Okay, you're good.
All right, so here we are.
Actually, later. I'll ask later.
Okay, so in terms of the role of women in the Civil War, I've got two notable names for you, then some general stories. But in terms of the notable names, she was the one on the quiz today. This is Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell. This one you might know.
Susan B. Anthony.
Not a terrible guess. That's Clara Barton. Clara Barton? Have you heard of Clara Barton?
Yes.
Okay, so the general story, by the way, is the Civil War provides opportunity for women. Some will simply work, some will be these like clerks. And again, the question that I could ask you would be like, short answer, provide one example how the lives of women changed as a result of the Civil War. You'd be like, oh, okay, one example. Hey, they had new working opportunities that were not short-term, that were not for young girls, not like the Lowell Mills, right? This is like real work. So many get that opportunity, and then some follow the medical path, like Dr. Blackwell. Some actually fight. I've got an interesting story on this on the next slide, but they like dress like men and fight.
Wait, what did Clara Barton do?
Nursing at first, then later she's famous for starting the American Red Cross. That's where I thought you might have heard her name, but she volunteers as a nurse. Her story's incredible if you ever read a little bit on Clara Barton. So she's like in the field assisting the surgeons. Nursing was not like a college profession yet, so she's kind of doing all of this on her own. But there's a story where in the heat of battle, she's helping out one of the surgeons who's like amputating someone, and a bullet goes through her dress, doesn't touch her, but kills the guy that she's working on. And that was like one of the traumatic experiences, but she continued her entire life helping throughout, wars and this and that. So yeah, kind of traumatic, but that's the quick story of Clara Barton. Just kind of link her to the nursing profession, and then later the founding of the American Red Cross. And in terms of women fighting, 400 do it. Someone wrote a book on that entire story. So that, by the way, first, I think highlights the fact that every single topic that we've looked at, you can page through your notes and then go like, pick something. I bet you a historian has written an entire 400-page book just on that topic. This person wrote an entire book on the women soldiers of the Civil War. You can kind of see that's a man, or that's a woman dressed as a man. She lived her entire life, even after the war, as a man. That's a passage from the book that I took from Amazon. One of my favorite stories of the Civil War era is of Jenny Hajus, and she fought as Elbert Cashier. She enlisted in Illinois, and she fought the entire Civil War without being discovered and ended up living the rest of her life like a man for another 50 years. She even ended up receiving a military pension, living at the Sailors and Soldiers Home in Illinois as a veteran. Staff at the home kept her secret for quite some time, even after they discovered that she was a woman. So kind of interesting, but again...
She has some really, masculine features.
Kind of. Maybe?
It's like a whole Caitlyn Jenner, vice versa.
Yeah, I guess, but maybe it's been a continuity throughout all history. But anyway, think about the fact that any topic that we've looked at, some historians written like a 300, 400-page book on it. So just know that we are in a survey course. Know that we are scratching the surface on every single topic that we look at. Know that some historian has written 400 pages on Bacon's Rebellion. Know that somebody's probably written like a 300-page book on the Petticoat Affair. And you're like, I don't even remember the Petticoat Affair, but a historian does. Look at you guys, my all-star class. Anyway, going forward, we got to look at political changes as a result of the Civil War. And one thing, the president has an unprecedented amount of power in the Civil War. Remember how Jackson was like, ooh, King Andrew, strong president. Yeah. Lincoln puts it to shame. Lincoln flexes his muscles more than any other president to that point. And he's going to do so kind of by breaking the Constitution. But again, understand that he's breaking the Constitution out of necessity because the Civil War is unprecedented. And that's why he's so aggressive in suspending civil liberties. He says he's suspending civil liberties in order to save the Union. Help me out, be impressive, smart class. What's the Latin term of suspending one particular civil liberty? Like your due process, your trial, habeas corpus. You remember that? That would be impressive if you could ever incorporate that into an essay.
How do you spell that?
Habeas corpus.
It doesn't
With
help
an-
at all.
Just sound it
You know
out.
what a word
Is that a P or a P?
It's a B, I think.
Yeah, habeas corpus. I think it's a P. Corpus.
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah.
maybe.
Habeas with a B. Corpus. Just try. Ask Google. Ask Siri. Give me one other example of a civil liberty that's suspended other than habeas corpus.
The press.
The press. If you were Confederate leaning, bye-bye, you cannot publish. Your free speech is taken away. If you're suspected of leaning towards the South, you're in jail. But he does it to save the Union. So just kind of think of that. They also say that Lincoln issues an illegal blockade without congressional authority. He says he does it to save the Union. So Lincoln is flexing his muscles clearly. Robert,
Were there any like minor witch hunts to like?
I'm sure. I'm sure some historian has written a 400-page book on the suspension of civil liberties during the Civil War. Look at this, though. Without the South in Congress, they're also able to accomplish things that they never could before. Remember how the South would always object to a high tariff? The South is not there. So the North passes the moral tariff that significantly raises it, protecting not only their industry, but it brings in a whole lot of money for the North. Can the South do it? The South could, but they are not going to because they're still dependent on exports. So the South, you're going to see their economy is in disaster throughout the war. This one's huge. The North gives away land for small farmers, and we're talking 160 acres. But I know what you're thinking. You're like, why would the South object to that? Why wouldn't the South want to give 160 acres to individuals?
Because they want big plantations.
Bingo. Because they want big plantations that have slavery that reinforce their plantation system. This is 160 acres to an individual family. You literally have to pay a $10 processing fee. But you want to know whose land is being given away?
Indians.
Oh yeah, there's that. So it's going to bring people into Indian territory, and sure enough, they're going to start giving away Indian land. As for the Pacific Railway Act, creates two companies, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. What are they going to build? The Transcontinental Railroad. So the Union Pacific, building this way, the Transcontinental Railroad, will eventually be completed by 1869. So more on that later. I've got other side notes, but just kind of think of the political changes without the South. Kind of makes sense? And again, why isn't King Cotton saving the South? Think of that quiz question today. Or maybe look at this political cartoon, kind of Humpty Dumpty like, but what's he sitting on? Can you see? Well, whatever it is, but he's sitting on slaves. He does not look all that stable. They think England's god is King Cotton, but again, it's not that stable of a god that sure enough will fall off and doesn't exactly end up helping the South. So just think your way through that one. As for this, again, Lincoln's famed quote, "One war at a time." This one you had in the Socrative quiz today, but that Trent affair, simply think the Union boards a British ship. Don't worry about the details, by the way. Just what I would do if I were you is lump all these together and understand that it's foreign intervention on behalf of the South. That's the best way to understand this. It's foreign intervention on behalf of the South. The Brits are kind of helping the South. They threaten the North. They almost go to war. Lincoln backs down, says one war at a time. This is actually a ship that the British built for the South. It's a commerce raider. So what it would do, it would be really fast, and it would allow the South to steal like northern ship stuff, like whatever was on there. And it actually stole a whole lot of stuff. These, they're rams, they're blockade runners. So they're supposed to break the blockade. They were in part like ironclad in the front, so they could break a blockade, get through, send out that cotton. These were built for the South. This gets there, that never got to the South. But you can kind of see how the Brits are helping, right?
So the Brits are helping
The South.
The South.
Can you figure out why?
Cotton.
There's cotton and something else.
They want us divided.
Why would they want us divided? You're right.
Then they can
Because then we're
conquer again.
easier to take over.
Take over, yeah.
Or a weakened America is a stronger Britain.
But if we're divided.
If
right,
we're divided.
And like they want to, not really conquer us, but wouldn't you say that that's like two armies though? You know what I mean?
No, because we wouldn't.
We're fighting ourselves.
So what we're
Yeah,
fighting
we're two now
ourselves.
tiny
Here's a
armies.
perfect example. As we're fighting ourselves, what happens to Mexico? You guys were taught this in world history. As we're fighting ourselves, who takes over Mexico? France. And what did we do about it?
Nothing.
Nothing. So just kind of think, as we're fighting ourselves, the Brits can take over the rest of the world. The French take over Mexico. That's the advantage of kind of supporting the Confederacy or splitting us apart. We will then be weak. So that's why they kind of help the South.
And hadn't at that point we kind of became like an economic superpower, but then we're kind of out of it because everything's going to the war. Or no?
We are becoming an economic superpower, at least the North is. I got a lot of detail on that. This one, look, it says our little arrangement. This guy is like the British Uncle Sam. His name is John Bull. So he's like, hey, come on, South. Push that thing up the hill. It's going to work out for you. Oh, no, it's not. It's going to crush you. So that's basically this political cartoon. This one, it's poking fun of the Southern economy. If you can see that, it's a satirical Southern coin, where on this Southern coin, rather than a strong eagle, you have like a goofy owl on a foundation that's cracking with a tattered flag on the back of a slave with a gun and a knife. And here it says, oh, ever pay never. The South was kind of notorious for not paying back its loans. The Brits didn't want to loan the South too much money because the South never really paid it back. So that's what they're making fun of. Definitely a point of view that is anti-Southern, right? Meanwhile, the Northern economy, doing well. Let's say the Northern economy is doing very well. They issue paper money that's strong, greenbacks. It's uniform. It's by the federal government. It's the first time ever they do this. You guys remember the mess of paper money in the past?
Yeah.
Like each bank did it differently? And then Jackson destroys all that and says, oh no, only gold and silver. Well, paper money has a practical value. The union is able to incorporate that. They back it up. It's uniform. Way to go, North. They got a high tariff. Not only protecting their industry, but it brings in a whole lot of money for the North, right? You ever hear of war bonds? It's where the people loan the government money. You can buy a war bond in a time of war. So you could loan the government $1,000 and the government will pay you back with interest. All that money's in the North. The South is not able to loan anyone money because they're kind of going broke. The North has a uniform banking system. Just kind of understand the economy is a major strength of the North. Whereas the South, they're going to be doing poorly, as you're about to see. Oh, let me give you one addition here. So all this looks great for the North, right? They also have a major discovery in 1859 in Pennsylvania that will totally transform the economy and still impacts us today. Oil is discovered in the North in 1859 in Pennsylvania. So think about the impact of oil. How many of your parents are still employed in the oil industry? It's discovered in the North. So the North is the gold from California, the gold and silver from Nevada. Now they have the oil in Pennsylvania. What's the South have?
Cotton.
Cotton. Oh, and that's not working out all that well for them. So check out the Southern economy. If you had $1 at the beginning of the war, your dollar was worth 1.6 cents by the end of the war. That's not that good. You could be sitting on $1 million. I can't do the math, but 1 million times point whatever math majors, you can figure that one out. Yeah, so you're broke. You don't have any money left because your dollar is now through 9,000% inflation. That, by the way, still happens in other countries today. Like Zimbabwe, you can get $1 trillion bill or something because they just keep printing and printing and printing money. That's what the South was doing. The North suffered from inflation, but not nearly like the South. And look at this one. The South was 30% of the national wealth. 10 years later, 12% of the national wealth. That's a whole lot of money just disappearing. So the Southern economy, let's say this, they were crushed until when? I told you this yesterday. 1940s, World War II. World War II brings back the Southern economy. By the 1950s and 60s, sure enough, people start moving to the South because of job opportunities. And even today, are people moving to the South for job opportunities? Me. I moved to the South for a job opportunity because the North was getting crushed. So yes, now people are moving to the South because the economy is doing so well here, right? And the North, you saw the news yesterday about like Michigan and Ohio, what is about to affect 15,000 workers. You guys don't watch the news, do you? GM is closing a bunch of plants.
Really?
So they're about to lay off 15,000 workers in Michigan and Ohio. That's why the Michigan economy has stunk so bad since the 1970s. GM and Ford, they keep laying off. And the entire Michigan economy at one point was totally dependent on the auto industry. So yeah, that's gonna be bad. Anyway, look at the prices. The type of question that I would ask you is, why does the price of coffee go up more than other goods? Because coffee's imported, and you can't import it because of the blockade. Follow it? Interesting. The northern economy, like I said, doing well. Fine, fine, fine. Got that one. Good. What if I give you this? This is a really common type of question, by the way, where I ask, okay, give me one political change as a result of the war, one economic change, one social change, but then curveball, I can change the years on you. And the answer should be totally different between those two. If it's 1860 to 1865, what am I primarily asking? I am primarily asking just about the Civil War. But if I include up to 1877, you've got Reconstruction, and holy cow, Reconstruction, the 13th Amendment will permanently get rid of slavery. The 14th Amendment will grant citizenship. The 15th Amendment will give voting rights. Wait till you see the changes during Reconstruction. So that's the second part of this answer. That's what I'll cover next week, by the way.
But the political through 1865 would just be all the changes without the South being in there, so like the Homestead Act and stuff.
Yes, yes, and yes. And then the South still really isn't let in through 1877.
Yeah.
The South will have to ratify amendments to get back in, and some drag their feet and don't want to do it. So you'll see that the military stays in the South until they ratify. Ready for a mess on this one? I've got like 10 different generals on this slide, some of which I'll ask you to remember and remember a couple details about, like this guy. The old timer, the hero of the Mexican-American War, Winfield Scott. You probably vaguely remember him. He was old in the Mexican-American War. He was old when he ran for president in 1852. Now he's so old he can't get on a horse, but he has one lasting contribution to the Civil War. He's got the master plan. This could be a perfect fill in the blanker. He's got a plan to slowly strangle the South into submission. The Anaconda Plan, that's his. He then dies, so he's not around for too much longer. He'll be replaced by Irwin McDowell. You don't have to remember too much about this guy. He's going to lose at the first major battle of the war. By the way, what is the first major battle of the war? Bull Run. Good. See, you guys know some of this stuff. He'll lose Bull Run. He'll be replaced by George McClellan. Now, when you're writing these names, if you're writing these names, just kind of circle McClellan, put some stars next to McClellan. He's the one that you probably need a significant amount of detail about. What's his main fault? He doesn't want to fight. The troops actually really liked George McClellan. If you look at this guy's resume, he went off to Prussia to observe the military and their excellence, and he knew the military. He knew how to train. He just never wanted to fight. So he would keep training his guys. They would get more recruits. He would outnumber the Confederacy 10-1. He would be told he has that advantage, and what would he choose to do? Nothing. He would train some more. So Lincoln's got a really famous quote. Not only does he give him the nickname Case of the Slows, Lincoln says, well, if McClellan doesn't want to use the army, I'd sure like to borrow it for a while. Lincoln wanted someone who could fight. So he eventually dismisses him, replaces him with Ambrose Burnside. The only real thing I have to say about Burnside is, yes, he literally gives us the name Sideburn. The Sideburn is named after Ambrose Burnside, appropriately. Pretty cool, huh? I'm thinking of bringing it back. So maybe as I like bald some more, I'll just bring back like that really cool looking thing.
I agree.
Yeah, there's not too much to note about the guy for our case for, you know, Civil War battles. He'll be replaced with an overly aggressive alcoholic, Fighting Joe Hooker. He didn't plan too much. He gets whooped. So Fighting Joe Hooker, again, was too aggressive. And even though he had superior numbers, he didn't plan it out, so he gets defeated by the South. And then who's he replaced with? Oh, George Meade. George Meade will be there during Gettysburg. Gettysburg, big Union victory in the North, right? Probably could have crushed the South if they chased after Lee during his loss, during his retreat. He chose not to, so he's going to be replaced with McClellan. Lincoln doesn't know what to do. He's going through generals every few months because no one is winning. The North is basically getting whooped by the South throughout 1863. So Lincoln's like, well, this guy, the troops like him. Huh? Meade, don't worry about the guys that I just kind of gloss over. But McClellan, now he's making a comeback, but you know what? It's not the end of McClellan. He comes back again in 1864. You know what he does in 1864? He runs for president against Lincoln. So he will be like the Democratic candidate for president in 1864. He had a fighting chance at winning that thing in 1864, but that's finally when Lincoln's able to get some victories under his belt. That's when Grant takes over. Grant had always won. He was in the South, he was in the West. Grant had some major victories.
So Grant takes over in 1864?
Grant takes over by 1864, and he stays because, again, he was not afraid to fight. He had the numbers, he had the support, he had the tactics, he was